welcome to this afternoon session, which is about IoT. Very broad topic, but we'll try and be as focused as we can. So just a quick introduction to myself. My name is Arun Dahiri. I think a lot of you know who I am, but in case you don't, I'm the MD of a consultancy business called Red Dawn Consulting, and we specialize in all things telecoms and media, so a strategy and management consultancy. And one of our hottest topics at the moment, believe it or not, is IoT. Within IoT, we have been doing a lot of work in sort of 3 or 4 areas. M&A is really hot right now. So lots of crazy valuations being achieved in the IoT world. The second topic we're doing is kind of sales enablement, go-to-market strategy, which is another hot topic. We're also doing quite a bit of negotiations, and I've negotiated with some of the carriers. So Kush, for example, who I've known for many years, we've been, although worked with him, but I've negotiated with him as well, which is very, very tricky when you know someone to negotiate, but it's been good fun. And also looking at product roadmaps and development. So what have we learned in that journey? And I just wanted to share one thing before I introduce the panelists and we kind of get stuck into the conversation. One theme to sort of take away from this, if I may suggest at the beginning, and hopefully it will come through, is that we can't look at IoT in isolated parts. It's got to be looked at as the entire ecosystem, because it just won't work unless you think of it as a service, as a managed service, which was connectivity, devices, management layer, billing, all of that. And that's one of the themes that I'd like to talk to you about today. And we have someone from the platform world that will help us to teach us about that. So without further ado, I'm just going to sort of ask the panelists to introduce themselves just one by one for just a few seconds, if you may, starting with.
Hi, good afternoon. Richard Doughty. I'm the Business Development Director at Cerillion, and Cerillion's the leading UK BSS OSS provider. You got one there?
Yeah, I have one. There's another one there. My name is Alan Ajuz. I'm the CEO of Telecall. Telecall has been 20 years on the telecom industry, mostly internationally. About 12 years ago, we got a license in Brazil. We started passing fiber, and finally, about 4 years ago, we got our mobility license, and we are full MVNA, MVNO, MVNE in Brazil, tackling also the IoT opportunities.
Great. Hello all, my name is Kushal Shah. I am Director of Business Development for BTEE. So we have the largest fixed and mobile network in the UK. And my responsibility is really to bring on board new partners onto our MVNO platform, as well as sell them on sort of fixed and convergent solutions.
Johannes?
Hello, everybody. My name is Johannes Opitz, and I'm responsible for the commercial roaming business of Deutsche Telekom. So whenever our customers are roaming abroad, my team and myself, we are responsible for negotiating the rates, as well as also in the area of IoT, purchasing local access around the globe wherever this is needed.
Brian?
Hi, everybody. My name is Brian Chiu. I am the Business Development Manager of China Mobile International. Basically, I'm based in Hong Kong, headquarters. And throughout all these years, I worked within the mobile business partnership team and responsible for a partnership with our MNO customer and partners to bring the IoT business into China. And also we help Chinese enterprise to go abroad and discuss on the partnership with MNOs. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, let's kick off. So I just wanted to sort of ask you all to treat this as interactive. Okay, we don't like just to kind of talk at you. We want to hear your questions. I know you'll have some good ones for us. And also in terms of your kind of feedback as we go, please feel free to put your hand up. Can I just ask, just so we know, we tailor our answers to you. How many of you are from carriers? Okay, anyone from platform? Okay, then everybody else must be from different service providers, I'm guessing. Right, let's kick off. So we've got 4 broad questions, and we'll try and sort of get through them as fast as we can to leave as much time for you to ask questions. So the first question I'd like to sort of pose to the esteemed panelist is about opportunities. Let's be positive, right? So what are the emerging IoT opportunities that you see? And within that, what challenges do you see? So I think I'd like to ask Kush that question first, seeing as he's right in the heart of the operator world.
Thank you, Aaron. Absolutely, it's a huge positive. I think if you look at all the predictions from all the analysts about where IoT is going over the next 10 years, they're in the billions of connections. Revenue-wise and connections-wise, certainly the figure of 6.2 billion is the latest report that I've seen by 2030. So there's a huge opportunity for IoT service providers and operators. But I think for me, the opportunities and challenges really come around taking it with a view of the lens of competition. So what's going to drive competition? Because it is going to be a very competitive market. It continues to be a competitive market. So there are a few drivers for me that are really pertinent to that conversation. And depending on how operators manage and navigate themselves through these key drivers will actually drive an outcome for them in a positive or a negative way in terms of market share. So for me, first of all, if you take the wholesale and retail sort of perspective, more so from the wholesale perspective today, but there are market segments that are huge opportunities. And I think connectivity, as we all know, is a small portion of that. So something I call value vertical integration, that is the ability to actually drill down into those verticals and provide what we call solutions rather than just connectivity. So for operators, it's absolutely critical that they don't get demarginalized in just selling connectivity. And that's something for BT and EE is a pertinent question at the moment. Secondly, eSIM. I know we've been talking about eSIM for years, but I think finally the time for eSIM is coming around the corner. You have operators like Truephone who are pushing the boundaries on their platform, et cetera, et cetera. So that is going to change the landscape for permanent roamers in a big way, and there creates an opportunity to actually drive new partnerships to deliver in that environment. And then the third one for me is connectivity and the different bearers. So you've got NB-IoT, LTE-M coming through, and it is predicted that 50% of the connections by 2030 are going to be on NB-IoT or LTE-M. So how do we navigate through that landscape? How do we actually deploy those solutions, and who are the ones that are going to do that faster? So for me, those are the sort of three double-edged swords that offer both opportunities but challenges in the marketplace.
Great. I'd like to actually ask Johannes next, if I may, because Kush is sort of looking at it from a more of a specific country perspective. That's your role. I know you have a global knowledge, but from your role's perspective, and I thought that because you probably, Johannes, have a few more jurisdictions in your remit, that you might have a sort of more broader kind of view. So where do you see the opportunities lying?
Yeah, I think from a carrier perspective or from an operator perspective, it is, we are looking on different, I would say, different layers. Yeah, because let's have, for instance, a look at the large, really the global companies. Well, they also want to have global companies to work with, and they want to have and reach out to companies providing them a one-stop shop global connectivity. We have other operators. I would say there are really there are regional connectivity providers, and of course it also differs from country to country. Yeah, so in my personal view, you will have operators who are very strong on, let's say, asking and purchasing connectivity. So the ones coming from regions which are more export oriented and having quite a good footprint around the world. And then you have other operators who are more, I would say, on the receiving end of connectivities, the ones who are actually don't have a really export-oriented economy, but are still very industrialized. Yeah, for instance, a country like Australia, it's very industrialized. They don't have a lot of export, so they won't export a lot of IoT devices, but they will be a net importer. Yeah, so I think we will see a little bit of a market segregation around who are actually the ones providing connectivity, IoT connectivity on a global scale, who are actually then the ones who are supporting these global companies with regional or local connectivity.
Brian, do you want to mention something on that point? Opportunities.
Yeah, I think for opportunity, IoT is always a scattered industry. So I think the connectivity or solution related to mobility is one of the major opportunity. So for example, we have come a lot of opportunity, but one of the keys, for example, is connected vehicles. So we have a lot of opportunity coming into China, and they actually not just need the connectivity, but they also need some advice and solution, which is we can enable them to roll out the solution in China. And actually, a lot of regulations in China, and then you need to be in compliance with the regulations. So I think this is the value that the MNO could bring to the customer. So not just about the connectivity. The connectivity, of course, for China Mobile is we have a very good coverage, and we have deployed our coverage in a very fast pace, and we are building 5G station, and we are rolling out a lot of 5G station and pushing the 5G, and actually we are pacing the path to roll out to support the industry to deploy the solution in mainland China. So I think this is one of the upcoming opportunity.
Okay, so looking at moving around the world, if we can go over to kind of US and kind of Brazil, I believe, is your main sort of jurisdiction.
Yes.
What do you think?
Well, I think we all agree that the mobile operators and the MVNOs, our first stage is, the connectivity. But the connectivity is what? Maybe 20% of the whole revenue, maybe less. When we start going, up on the stack of the value added that we can provide, and I think that's the challenge that the MNOs have and the MVNOs have and the platforms have, is to generate some type of value for whoever is taking the service. That can be, a manufacturer or global player who is looking for, connectivity facilitated with either sponsor roaming, and we're talking about local EMCs, local profiles, or we're talking now on eSIM, So the turnkey solution for whoever is taking that service and how we present them and the whole journey through the digital transformation and actually giving access to those services to whoever is taking those services, basically tech providers, new apps, new solutions.
So I just wanted to kind of summarize the whole thing by saying that I think that it seems like there's kind of solutions that need to be thought through to monetize, but which is the next topic really. But also in terms of opportunities are really in the vertical spaces where you need the end-to-end knowledge and experience. What I'll do, just to keep things moving, is
just on the
please,
to add on the
please.
connectivity side also, what we didn't mention here, there are also an opportunity on private networks and just like you said, Edge IoT. So that's still on the carrier side, which they can still provide some value on the connectivity side, but it's also limited.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do is, can you hear us, guys?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Just in time, because I've got a question for you. Specific strategies that you have to actually sort of create some monetization
On the strategies to monetize IoT, I think we have to be very careful as operators in order to set the right pricing, because it is actually on the retail end, the rates for connectivity are very, very low, because in the majority of the cases, it is, despite it's not the case, it is considered being a commodity. So having that in mind, we also have to twist our head around really what the right pricing is in order not to overprice these new trends, because if we at the beginning set the wholesale price too high, we will simply kill this business. Setting it also too low is something we cannot afford. No, I mean it has to cover the network cost. It has to cover the variable network cost plus a decent margin. And we also know that there is a cost of a SIM card that is latched onto a mobile network. Especially when we talk about different technologies. Yeah, we all know that NB-IoT has a different underlying cost structure, so it has to be cheaper than, for instance, LTE or 5G. But we also have to come up with intelligent pricing, meaning that a higher quality of service is also justifying a higher price. And when we, for instance, think of 5G, of course, we will see different rates for different slices, for different quality of services, for different throughputs. So this is what we have to have in our mind when we are, even on a wholesale perspective, start to monetize. There is actually no one price fits all. There is a different cost structure when, for instance, you have a metering device or a positioning, a tracking device that is running through the country, just only creating location updates, but there is actually no wholesale data that is running through. And on the other hand, you may have a car that is equipped with Google Maps and live traffic. When this car is running through a country, it easily consumes up to 2 GB. So you really have these two extremes, and you have to come up with an intelligent wholesale pricing to enable, but not to kill this business.
Thank you. Brian, can you hear us?
Yes, yes.
Okay, brilliant. Do you want to, whilst we're on the screen, if you could give us some insights as to any sort of specific strategies for monetization?
Yeah, actually, I totally agree with Johannes. So in terms of roaming, I think for the wholesale roaming, traditionally the business model is just for the travelers. But for IoT is totally different. But now the pricing is not catching up the change. So I think the market and all the MNOs is struggling for how to monetize from this IoT roaming. And I think there's a need for a new business model for IoT roaming. So especially, for example, in 5G, there's a lot of different cases, including the high bandwidth use case and also some of the very low bandwidth like NB-IoT or MMTC. So this is something which is something we have not seen that before. So there's a need for the new business model. And of course, for the past few years, I've been working on not just on roaming, but also we work on the local profile. So we support very specific IoT use case, like as I mentioned, connected vehicles. So this one, you just can't rely on the roaming, but you need to follow the regulations in China. So that's why I think there's a different ways to cater different cases. So for roaming, we have a new business model. And for some local domestic case, like a high bandwidth case, so we will have, we can provide them a China SIM in physical SIM card or even in the eSIM, eSIM capability. We have already eSIM capability for years, but we are still struggling for how to monetize those use cases, and based on those platforms, how can we push up the business? So this is how we're facing.
Okay, I think what I'd like to do is ask somebody that's from a region that is quite challenging, Alan, in terms of monetization. And I think the Brazil market, and I know there's issues, lots of issues there. Tax, you've got on the wholesale side of things, you've got issues with permanent roaming, etc. So could you give us some insights as to how we might be able to monetize?
Sure. Well, we all spoke here about sponsor roaming or roaming in IoT devices. In Brazil, permanent roaming is not allowed. So that creates also a challenge and also an opportunity. In our case, an opportunity because we're providing those profiles for international roamers into Brazil so they can use local profiles, which is a challenge also in the integration side. Now eSIM coming up, that makes our life much easier. But it also the uptake of the eSIM on the other side also to happen. There are also other business models that we'll discuss later. Like I'll just throw it in here, which is soft SIM and some other vendor solutions that they are already providing. I'll say eSIM on the module side. When we're discussing about pricing, and I heard everyone, we're discussing how we can protect the price, how we don't go too low on the pricing, they go too high on the pricing. We all know that there are already players on the IoT space, global players, and they're actually pricing 10-year on connectivity at $10, right? So that 10 euros, that's a challenge. When we look at this whole roaming and the uptake, but carriers have always been very creative on the pricing side. I think there's one of the industries that we package and we try to come up with different prices, different combos, different pricing plans that makes our life sometimes harder, sometimes easier, because the user have an experience, have their price, and it's one of the only industries that I know that the prices only go down, right? So that's the expectations.
Okay. I think it sort of in the cellular world, I think it is definitely going down, but I think there are some nuggets of opportunity, so particularly in satellite IoT.
I think it comes back to the point about sort of what I termed value vertical integration. So that's the ability to actually just go beyond the connectivity, develop value-added services. But I think those value-added services have two approaches to them. They have sort of a wide approach that is relevant to sort of IoT in general, but then you do have to get specific to the verticals and the functionality and the features that those verticals require. So, you've got certain features and functionality that the utility sector requires versus the healthcare versus automotive. And it requires a specialism and the ability to develop applications on top of that connectivity, really, to then help sell the solution. So we always come back to that same theme of how do we sell the solution and not just the connectivity. And I think those operators, I believe, actually have to develop IoT practices, not connectivity solutions. So they actually have to become consultants themselves if they really want to survive in the long-term future. Otherwise, like you say, we just become the dumb pipe. And the ones who are succeeding, sort of, I don't know, AT&T, China Mobile, sorry. Who else? Is Verizon, Telefonica, those guys that really actually have spent time developing those internal practices and actually putting investment and resource behind their IoT functions for years now, and they're actually stealing a march ahead of some of the other global operators out there.
I mean, there are sort of business models which do make money on IoT. I mean, not that many. From what we see, it's critical comms, personal safety, asset tracking, that kind of stuff. Where the money comes in is where customers see value. So if there's a solution that delivers value, then they'll pay for it, and then that feeds that supply chain all the way down to the SIM manufacturers themselves or eSIMs. The trouble with a lot of IoT, those 6.8 billion devices, how many of those are actually of value and generating revenue? Is very few.
So on that point, Richard, in terms of you mentioned some of the topics that I'd written down just before. You must have read my notes.
I was leaning on you.
Yeah. So where we're seeing with some of our service providers, the Wireless Logics of this world, and Mobius Networks is another one we're working with, and a few other sort of players, alerting to be able to respond to specific events, the analytics behind that, security, so people pay a premium for that. Critical comms, I think, is where there's a lot of value, particularly if you combine that with satellite for non-terrestrial. So we're looking at marine and when you're out of coverage. And health and security, I mentioned security, but asset tracking is a big one. So if we can sort of play that game properly, and one of the things which we've sort of come across is operators now are more. We got asked a question by one of the operators: how can we monetize our APIs? How can we create an orchestration layer that actually we can charge for knowledge and information about what's happening within the actual device layer? So that's kind of sort of wrapping up that question.
As an operator, we have both a retail and a wholesale division. So obviously I work for BT Wholesale, and we have a natural Chinese wall, of course, but BT has been a wholesaler for decades, and we have that in our DNA. So it's the responsibility of the wholesale department to ensure that they play that enabling role, because at the end of the day, we provide connectivity, but we are limited in terms of the value-added services that we can really provide. So it's actually allowing and working with the right partners, such as recently we partnered up with Wireless Logic, so one of the largest IoT service providers in Europe, and they particularly specialize in connectivity value-added services, especially for the high usage segments. And we just need to let them go in and do what they need to do, and do what they're good at, but provide the right commercial models, the right product set, and the right partnership values that allow them to go and be successful in what they do best. So that whole operator partnership relationship is really key. I focus on MVNOs, and I think MVNOs are becoming more and more popular because of what's driven by eSIM as well. And so what we're seeing is the increase in full MVNOs coming to the market because they offer that local breakout, are able to do that in a world where I think eSIMs are going to transform the market. I think we underestimate that.
No, can I just ask how long we've got left on this panel? I've lost track of the time.
I think that's Aaron trying to tell me to stop talking.
Sorry? 5 minutes. Okay, so let's move on. So just we mentioned Chinese walls. Let's break them down a little bit. Brian, about channel and partnership, anything specific that you might want to add to that question?
Yeah, I totally agree with Christian. I think for partnership, I would always prefer the partnership and throughout the channel. So for IoT space, it's a highly scattered market. So I think it's a must to have a collaboration and partnership together to face this market. So for China Mobile, we have through all these years we work in IoT market is actively. So in the 5G is coming, and we have actively promoting the alliance. So we would like to build the alliance and the ecosystem for IoT. So including the 5G, I think it's more than 50 alliance already driven by China Mobile in China. So China Mobile 5G Innovation Center, IoT Alliance, Device Industry Alliance, and multimedia, whatever alliance, we are working on all these alliance to work together with our partners. So, and also, I think for the enterprise customer, they always would prefer a single contract with one of their service provider, because for global connectivity is always a challenge to the enterprise, even for the large scale enterprise. So they would prefer one single point of contact for their connectivity service provider. So so that's why I think for partnership, I think most of the MNO will prefer to go to the partnership way. And also, I'm also from the wholesale department. So we work together very closely with our partners all over the world. We work on different business traditionally in roaming, in voice, SMS. So I think by leverage the partnership, I think it's very good to move on to on other business like IoT as well. So I think, yeah, this is what I think.
Okay. Any quick comments on partnerships before we move on to the last question?
I'll just add again about the different ways I see partnership. Well, first one on a global scale with carriers who already have global contracts with global companies. So that's one of the channels that I see. The second one will be integrators, like Wireless Logic or IoT companies that are already established, that already provide those types of connectivity. And then, on the other side, you have equipment vendors or handsets or IoT modules who are also embedding their modules with direct connectivity at the module level. So on the wholesale level, that's some of the different channels that we see. And obviously, as you go closer to the user, you have other challenges and other channels.
Okay, so I just want to add a couple of points before
Perhaps
we...
a last comment, if I may.
Please.
I think, first of all, I think we totally agree that there is not one fits all connectivity. It always depends on the use case. But especially as mobile operators, we should be very cautious in which use cases actually our SIM cards, especially while roaming, are ending up. And because more often than ever, it can create, be it the fault of a wrong GSM module deployed in the device, it can create signaling storms, and all of a sudden your home network is going down, and you don't know where the signaling storm is coming from. So it should be well managed, especially when you are reselling your resources, or whether you are embedding your IMSIs or eSIMs into a module. And you have, at the end of the day, literally no clue where the SIM cards are popping up and to what extent.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. So I think what we've witnessed as some interesting winning strategies are embedding at source. So with the OEMs, the equipment manufacturers, getting partnerships with them at source is a good idea. Particularly with eSIM, as you mentioned, Kush, is easier now. Roaming hubs is another one, because you need this contiguous, that's a big word for me, contiguous connectivity story. You have to have both cellular and narrow band, low bandwidth, plus also satellite, all in the mix, including also sort of Wi-Fi. So you need to think of the handoff. So I think partnerships with those sorts of players. And I think to the point we made earlier on is around people that understand the verticals, because that more and more is becoming more and more important. Which kind of leads me to the last question, really, in terms of understanding what's required by the different use cases. Is around, my last question is, what are the building blocks for IoT delivery? How do we make this happen? Yeah. And I see you like that topic question, so I'm sure you've got some questions. Richard, I think given that you're from the platform world,
I have some views on this.
please could you take that question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think as a summary, they're not that different to all those components we're familiar with in more traditional telco, from RAN, core, policy, charging, catalog, product, SOM, fulfillment, billing. It has all the same components. I think the challenges IoT M2M have is almost two sides. The first is that it gets sometimes approached as a thing in its own right, and IoT needs to be able to then fund the infrastructure it requires. And then operators do the business case on that, and they realize there's not much revenue, even less margin, and what's left at the bottom to pay for the kit is very little. And the other problem is that within the industry and the operators, and we're all guilty of this, we've sort of got consumer and we've got business and public sector, and then we think, oh, there's IoT, like this fourth vertical, where actually it's just a component that's going to exist in each of those others. The long and the short of that is you don't need any new kit to do IoT. If you do it within your existing BSS, OSS, catalog, charging, network, etc., then actually it can be added on and sold as an upsell component solution as it should be. And it doesn't need all that separate expenditure. That's what I think.
Anybody else have any insights on building blocks? What do we need to make this happen?
I think one really important area that has been mentioned briefly, but it's something that I think we need to really focus on going into the future, is the security elements. Do you think about the number of connections that are going to be out there, globally, in country? That's effectively an access point into the network, however sort of remote it is, but it's an access point, and security then becomes absolutely fundamental in this day and age where, we all know what's going on in the world at the moment. But I think cybersecurity and the threat of cybersecurity is going to be potentially the next, COVID situation. So that vulnerable situation that we put ourselves in, and IoT has a responsibility. So all providers in IoT have an inherent responsibility to ensure that they, do their best to develop the applications that help, keep the network and protect the network.
Any points from you?
I'm with the security side. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest challenge. I'm seeing different approaches from trying to slice the network, separate it. But again, in Brazil, the permanent roaming issue is one of the things that we put as a control. And I think roaming, it will be a big challenge, especially in Europe, that you don't have you can have roaming from any of the European countries.
Security, I think, will be particularly bad. I completely agree, Cushion. It's going to be a combination of things. I think the ability to, these billions of almost anonymous, unidentified access points out there, the increase in software-defined networks, which are co-load in the public hyperscalers, and the ability to then hop on one network, elevate your privileges, and hop over to somebody else's. And this is all completely possible now.
Okay.
I can't do it, but I'm sure there are people who can.
The online team, anyone got any last-minute comments on the building blocks? How are we going to make this happen?
I think what is also becoming increasingly more important is the underlying quality of service, what as an operator is we have to provide in order to have the service continuously running, right? I mean, as Kash said, yeah, I don't want to end up in a self-driving car that is somehow compromised, but I also don't want to end up in a self-driving car where the latency is, for whatever reason, too slow for the self-driving car to react. I think it's really a combination of a lot of different building blocks. And the challenge really is that all the different use cases at the end of the day have to be supported by different platforms, different connectivity layers, different analytics, different connectivity technologies even. So it is becoming more and more complex. I think this is what everybody has to acknowledge.
I think, just sort of final points before we ask anyone got any more questions. From a building block perspective, just really simply from a commercial point of view, I think, simple things like having nice front-end GUIs for customers to be able to, control the devices and see what's going on is something which I think is missing. The other thing is, I think, again, I like to keep things simple. From making the whole negotiation and contract process simpler. I'm trying not to look at Kush because I've negotiated, and I know it's a kind of difficult when you're from a very sort of monolithic big brand and trying to fight internal politics. But I think you're very good at making that process more slick and quick and easier. But in a lot of cases, the wireless logic deal we did together, was great, but it wasn't, some corporate challenges.
Yeah.
But I think that's something that we as an industry need to kind of do better, is just make the process easier. And, it's quite difficult because people come to us and say, how do we get a deal? They don't know where to go, and they don't know who's offering airtime at what rates and what geographies they cover. There's a lack of knowledge. There's a divide between the people that want the service and the people that supply them. So I think that kind of, there's a bit of a gap there. I know Frankie's in the room, all the way from the US. We were involved in the International MVNO Association some time ago, which we're going to, I think, give rebirth to as of today, I think. She was very much trying to create a fair environment that people could know who to go to and where to get the right rates and create standardized contracts. So she was a real champion of that. So that's one of the building blocks. But I think we have some time for a couple of questions.
8 years in the business. I was across automotive, utilities, and then I led global expansion for a bit, which was reselling. I worked with Carga, reselling Vodafone's GDSP platform, which I think Wireless Logic use. One theme across the whole point, the whole proposition, and this is what Johannes touched on, is the service piece. Doesn't matter who we sell it to. Doesn't matter if it's TDC in Denmark, Elisa in Finland, BMW, VW. Service is a problem. Quality of connectivity. I think that, get that right from a M&O perspective. You've got the crown jewels there. Everyone's going to buy from you day one, all the time.
That's a really good point, and I think one key aspect of that is coverage, which is a very simple thing to talk about, right? But actually, if you look at IoT and critical applications and the whole coverage issue, et cetera, et cetera. That's why I'm actually proud to work for EE, because it's the network leader in coverage versus the other operators.
Commercial break.
But truly proud to work for a network where I think we've spent a lot of money and time and investment in actually ensuring that the coverage is at its maximum. The emergency services network chose us as a result. So I'm not selling the network, but it's a genuine thing to be proud of, because coverage is really important in IoT. And there are many facets to the service to say, coverage is not the only issue, but I think there are some critical components of what IoT requires, and it's just getting the basics right first can really help. And then the quality of service, depending on what and the 5G, as we all know, will help us to, or enable us to provide better quality of service, more differentiated quality of service, when we get to a point where the coverage is there.
I think there's a challenge for operators, because they obviously would like to keep that customer on their network, but sometimes when there's a requirement to have border connectivity, which maybe they can't patch. I know EE's got very strong connectivity, but not in some cases. But the ability to be able to switch between, and I know eSIM and that sort of thing, software defined, allows us to kind of flip between different bearers.
I think just on, you talked about going back to the making money question earlier on. BT did a great move, I think a couple of years ago now, network access fee, which is being adopted across the Nordics as well as others, which is driving up the ARPU for cellular roaming. And I think that's possibly the way that MNOs are going to protect themselves. You've got these chatty devices, as was mentioned, no one knows what they're doing, it's a risk. And I think that was a really smart move. Killed me at the time, but it was a smart move.
Yeah, no, and minimum SIM fees, network access fees, etc. They're important, especially on the low usage end, where it protects us from using the network, but we're getting something for it back. The other area I think is also really interesting is just some perspective of MVNOs again, and the full MVNOs, and how they're actually monetizing their model. Because they've got their own number ranges and their own profiles, etc. It's really important to have, for us, visibility, or at least work with them to understand, where they're going with their solutions as well. Because I think it's important for partnerships to work well together.
Right. Any more questions? Okay. Well, as you probably gathered, this was fairly prepped, but I'm going to do something a bit wild, as I do at the end of these things, is to ask one question, final question, with very, very short, quick answer from the 5 panelists. Okay, this is not prepared. So if there's one thing, one proposition, one go-to-market topic, service that you would want to launch for IoT, what would it be? Kush.
What really excites me, this is not a proposition, but what really excites me in the future and looking forward to is the metaverse combined with IoT.
Very good. Okay.
Who knows?
Well, for me, it will be the evolution of a middle ground, like a CPaaS that we have today for voice and SMS and connectivity, enabling partners to actually provide their own services and with their own APIs and do whatever they want with the service.
Brian?
I think I will offer the one of the AI solution together with the IoT, because for the operator, we have all the data, we have all the fundamental to build up this AI engine, and then we can upsell it together with the IoT.
Johannes?
I don't care as long as it is really secure.
Secure.
Security is going to be the new fraud, I'm pretty sure.
I actually wrote down security as one of mine, so I'm going to have to think of another one.
Yeah, but we can rule out that I was looking into your notes.
Richard?
Sorry, I might. I'm going to say full RAN to settlement private network in a box. The applications for that, I think, are almost endless.
Fantastic. Okay, brilliant. I think that, again, because Frankie's in the room, I think wearables at a mass scale, right? I think, it is something which I think is going to protect people, I think. Please save my kids from the tech world and the metaverse, please. They've been damaged enough from our cell phones. But I think the more we can do in terms of, mass sort of consumer IoT to make our lives better, lifestyle services, health, that sort of thing. I always can't have a conference speech without talking about my Apple Watch and how I use it every half an hour to check my health, and it has helped a lot. I think there's lots of lifestyle services that we haven't even started yet, and I think it's going to change our lives. So that's my view. Right. Thank you very much for your participation, audience. I hope you've enjoyed that. Let me just, without further ado, just say thank you to the esteemed panelists. So Johannes, Brian, Kush, Alan, and Richard. Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.